Got any bright ideas, Pops? Or are you just here to sweep up our failure? The voice, sharp with the condescending arrogance only a fresh engineering degree can bestow, cut through the humid air of the motor pool. Arthur Corrigan paused, the bristles of his push broom resting on the oil-stained concrete. He was 78 years old, with a gentle stoop to his shoulders and hands gnarled by a lifetime of work. He looked at the young man, whose name tag read Torres, and then at the monolithic block of inert steel and armor it was his job to fix, a high-mobility multi-purpose wheeled vehicle, or Humvee, dead as a stone. 3 other engineers, all of them looking barely old enough to shave, were gathered around the vehicle's open engine bay. They were a flurry of motion and useless jargon, their crisp coveralls already smudged with grease. Laptops were open on the hood, displaying complex diagnostic schematics that seemed to offer no answers. The air crackled with their frustration. This wasn't just any Humvee. It was the command vehicle, slated for a full inspection by a visiting general in less than 24 hours. Its silence was a ticking clock, and every second that passed tightened the knot of panic in their stomachs. Arthur said nothing. He simply watched. His eyes, pale blue and clouded with age, weren't looking at the frantic engineers. They were scanning the machine. He saw the way it sat, the subtle sheen of a fluid leak near the transfer case that the young experts had missed, the almost imperceptible sag in the wiring harness near the firewall. He had known these machines since before they were born. "Hey, I'm talking to you," Torres snapped, walking over to Arthur. "This is a restricted area. You're a janitor. Your job is to push dirt, not gawk at sensitive military hardware." Arthur's gaze finally shifted from the Humvee to the young man. He offered a small, placid smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "She's not getting fuel pressure to the injectors," he said, his voice a low, gravelly rumble. "Your primary fuel pump is fine, but the lift pump relay is fried. Common issue on this model when it's hot." The 3 other engineers stopped what they were doing and stared. Torres let out a short, incredulous laugh. "The lift pump relay? Oh, is that right? And what would a janitor know about the electronically controlled fuel injection system of a diesel engine? Did you read that in a cleaning manual?" Another engineer, a kid with red hair and a face full of freckles, chimed in. "We already checked the relays, old-timer. The diagnostics are clear. It's a logic fault in the engine control module. We're preparing to swap it out." Arthur's gaze drifted back to the engine. "You can swap out the ECM if you want. It's a $6,000 part and 3 hours of labor, and when you're done she still won't start. The diagnostic is giving you a false negative because the relay isn't dead, it's just failing under load. It shorts out once it heats up. By the time you run your test, it's cooled down enough to pass." He pointed a crooked finger toward a small black box deep in the engine's guts. "It's that one there. The third one from the left. Should be a little warm to the touch." This was too much for Torres. The sheer audacity of the old man, a custodian, to not only question him, but to give a specific technical diagnosis was an insult to his entire education. He saw the small crowd that was beginning to form, a few mechanics from other bays, a couple of soldiers waiting for assignments. They were all watching. "Okay, that's it," Torres said, his face flushing with anger. "You are officially interfering with a mission-critical repair. I want you to take your broom and get out of this motor pool right now before I call the MPs and have you cited for trespassing." Arthur didn't move. He just stood there, a silent, unmovable object of quiet defiance. He had seen young men like Torres before, cocky, proud, and terrified of being wrong. He'd seen them in motor pools in Germany, in the dusty heat of Iraq, in the frozen mud of Korea. They were all the same. They confused knowledge with wisdom. "Son," Arthur said, his voice still unnervingly calm, "that vehicle needs to be on the line tomorrow morning. You're chasing a ghost in the machine. Let me just—" He took a half-step toward the Humvee. Torres physically blocked his path, puffing out his chest. "You are not touching this vehicle. You are a civilian contractor. You have no authorization. Do you understand me? You are a janitor, a floor sweeper. What could you possibly do?" He gestured dismissively at the old leather pouch on Arthur's belt. It was cracked and faded, the leather worn smooth from decades of use. "What are you gonna do? Hit it with a magic wrench from your little cleaning kit?" As Torres gestured to the pouch, the world seemed to shimmer for a moment in Arthur's vision. The scent of motor oil and hot asphalt was replaced by the acrid smell of cordite and burning sand. The whine of diagnostic tools faded, replaced by the deafening crack of rifle fire and the frantic shouts of young men. He wasn't in a peaceful motor pool in the United States. He was on a dusty road outside Fallujah. A heavy MRAP was disabled, a casualty of an IED, its crew pinned down by enemy fire. A younger Arthur, his face grimed with dirt and sweat, was under the vehicle, That very same leather pouch opened beside him. He was using a simple multi-tool from it, his hands working with a surgeon's precision, splicing wires, bypassing a fried circuit while bullets pinged off the armor just inches from his head. He got it running. He always got it running. The memory was gone as quickly as it came, a ghost of a life these boys couldn't possibly imagine. "I'm warning you, old man." Torres's voice broke through the echo of the past. "Get away from the vehicle. I am calling my supervisor, and I am calling base security." The small crowd had grown. More soldiers and mechanics had gathered, drawn by the confrontation. Among them was Gunnery Sergeant Evans, a man whose face was a roadmap of a 25-year career in the Marine Corps. He was now assigned to the base as a senior logistics NCO. He didn't know the janitor's name, but he had seen him around. He'd noticed the way the old man's eyes would linger on a piece of machinery, the way he carried himself with a quiet purpose that belied his menial job. Evans had a nose for competence, and an even better nose for arrogance. When Torres put his hand on Arthur's shoulder, intending to physically move him, something in Evans snapped. It was a line that shouldn't be crossed. Disrespect was one thing, putting your hands on an old man was another. Evans turned, his face a thundercloud. He walked a few paces away, pulling out his personal cell phone. He scrolled through his contacts, past names like Motor Pool Dispatch and Supply Chief, and stopped on one he rarely used, Colonel Wallace, XO. He pressed the call button. "Ma'am, this is Gunnery Sergeant Evans over at the main motor pool," he said, his voice low and urgent. The colonel's aide answered. "I need to speak with the colonel. It's an emergency." A moment later, a crisp male voice came on the line. "Wallace here. What is it, Gunny?" "Sir," Evans began, keeping his voice down but unable to hide the disbelief in his tone. "You're not going to believe this. It's about Arthur, the janitor." There was a pause on the other end. "Arthur, the quiet old fellow. What about him?" "Sir, we have a team of new civilian engineers down here. They can't get the command Humvee started, the one for the general's visit. Arthur tried to tell them what was wrong with it, and now they're trying to have him arrested. The lead engineer is putting his hands on him right now, sir. They're calling him a senile old man and a security risk." The silence on the other end of the line was heavy and absolute. Evans could almost feel the temperature drop through the phone. The scene cut to a large wood-paneled office in the base command building. Colonel Wallace stood frozen behind his desk. The phone pressed so hard against his ear his knuckles were white. His eyes, which a moment before had been scanning a budget report, were now wide with a dawning horror. He listened to Gunnery Sergeant Evans' report from the motor pool, his expression shifting from confusion to shock, and then to pure, unadulterated alarm. "They're doing what?" he finally whispered into the phone, his voice barely audible. He listened for another moment. "Stay there, Gunny. Do not let them take him anywhere. I'm on my way." He didn't hang up the phone. He slammed it down into its cradle with a crash that made his young aide, a fresh-faced lieutenant, jump. "Lieutenant," Wallace's voice was a cannon shot in the quiet office. "Get me the base commander on my private line now. Tell him it's a Code Orion situation." "A Code Orion, sir," the lieutenant stammered, fumbling for the intercom. He'd never heard that designation before. "Just do it," Wallace roared. He was already shrugging on his uniform jacket, his movements sharp and frantic. "Then get the base sergeant major on the phone. I want him and a full 4-man honor guard to meet me at the main motor pool, on the double, full dress uniform." The lieutenant stared, utterly baffled. "Sir, an honor guard, for a janitor." Colonel Wallace stopped, turning to face his aide. His eyes were blazing. "Lieutenant, that man is not a janitor. That is Chief Warrant Officer 5 Arthur Artie Corrigan, retired. The Artie Corrigan. He designed the diagnostic system for the M1 Abrams tank. He holds 3 patents on composite armor solutions. He served for 30 years and literally wrote the book on battlefield vehicle recovery. When the Pentagon had a problem with the original up-armored Humvee design, they didn't call the manufacturer. They flew him to the green zone in a helicopter to fix it. That man is a living legend. Now get me my goddamn honor guard and tell the commander the cavalry needs to ride right now." Back at the motor pool, Torres was feeling victorious. The old man had fallen silent, offering no more resistance. Torres interpreted this as a victory, a confirmation of his own authority. He pulled out his own phone and in a loud voice for the benefit of the crowd, called his direct supervisor. "Yeah, it's Torres," he said, pacing back and forth. "Listen, you're not going to believe the morning I'm having. The ECM on the command Humvee is shot, and to make matters worse, I've got some senile old janitor down here trying to tamper with the vehicle." He paused, letting the lie sink in. "Yeah, the janitor. He's a real safety hazard. completely off his rocker. He's been trying to get at the engine, making all sorts of crazy claims. Frankly, I think he's a security risk. We need to have his base access revoked immediately, pending a full investigation. Who knows what he could have done? He could be a spy for all we know. He was building his case, piling lie upon lie, digging a hole for himself so deep he couldn't see the sky. He was so wrapped up in his own performance that he didn't hear the distant sound at first, but others did. Gunnery Sergeant Evans heard it, and a slow, grim smile spread across his face. It was a siren, but not the yelp of a military police car. It was the powerful, low-frequency whoop of command vehicle escorts. The sound grew rapidly louder, converging on their location. A moment later, a convoy of 2 black Chevrolet Suburbans and a polished flag-bearing Humvee came roaring into the motor pool, screeching to a halt just yards from the scene. The dust had barely settled before doors flew open. Out stepped the base commander, a full-bird colonel with a chest full of ribbons, followed closely by Colonel Wallace and the base's top enlisted man, the sergeant major. Behind them, 4 soldiers in immaculate dress blues, rifles held in perfect unison, formed an honor guard. The entire motor pool went dead silent. The low hum of machinery, the chatter, the clanging of tools, it all vanished. The crowd, which had been a loose semicircle, parted as if struck by a lightning bolt. Torres and his team of engineers froze in place, their mouths hanging open. Their world had just been turned completely upside down. The base commander, a man named Peterson, surveyed the scene with a gaze as cold as glacial ice. He ignored the stunned engineers, ignored the gawking crowd. His eyes locked onto one person and one person only. He strode forward with a purpose that radiated pure authority, his boots clicking on the concrete, not stopping until he was 2 feet in front of the stooped, elderly janitor. Colonel Peterson's back went ramrod straight. He brought his hand up to his brow in the sharpest, most respectful salute Torres had ever witnessed. It was a salute reserved for heroes, for dignitaries, for Medal of Honor recipients. "Mr. Corrigan," the commander's voice boomed, clear and resonant across the silent tarmac. "It is an honor to see you again, sir." Arthur, who had remained placid through all the insults and threats, simply gave a slight, tired nod of acknowledgement. "Colonel," he said, his voice quiet but carrying the weight of history. The commander held his salute for a long moment before dropping his hand. He then turned, slowly, to face the crowd, his eyes eventually settling on the pale, terrified face of Torres. "For the education of some people here," the commander began, his voice dangerously low, "it seems a history lesson is in order. This man, who you know as Arthur the Janitor, is Chief Warrant Officer 5 Arthur Corrigan. This man dedicated 30 years of his life to the United States Army. When a new tank design had a flaw that stumped the engineers at General Dynamics, they called this man. When rescue vehicles were failing in the mountains of Afghanistan, it was this man who redesigned the transmission linkage on the back of a napkin in a dusty tent, a design that is still in use today." The commander took a step closer to Torres, whose face had gone from white to a sickly green. "This man holds the Distinguished Service Cross, a silver star, and 3 bronze stars for valor. He doesn't wear them, because he doesn't believe he did anything any other soldier wouldn't have done. He took this job, cleaning our floors for minimum wage, not because he needs the money, but because, and he told me this himself, he wanted to stay close to the soldiers and the machines that were his life's work. He wanted to feel useful." The commander paused, letting the weight of his words settle over the crowd. The looks of shock had transformed into something else, awe, shame, and profound respect. The soldiers in the crowd stood a little straighter. The other mechanics looked at the ground, ashamed of their silent complicity. Gunnery Sergeant Evans just stood with his arms crossed, nodding slowly. "You," the commander said, his gaze now boring directly into Torres, "are an engineer. You work with facts and data. The fact is, you were disrespectful. The data is, you were wrong. And your conclusion is, you are a disgrace to this installation." The commander's voice never rose to a shout. It was far worse. It was a clinical, devastating dissection. "Your arrogance, your profound lack of humility, and your disrespect for your elders is an embarrassment. You and your team are on administrative leave, effective immediately. Your work here is done. You will report to Gunnery Sergeant Evans on Monday morning at 0500 hours for a month-long remedial course. It will cover military customs and courtesies, the history of this base, and a block of instruction on how to show respect for the men who built the very world you take for granted. Are we clear?" Torres could only manage a choked, pathetic nod. It was then that Arthur finally spoke up, his calm voice cutting through the thick, tense air. "Colonel, that's not necessary," he said, taking a small step forward. "They're good kids, just a little too proud of what they know, and a little too scared of what they don't. We've all been there. He looked at the young, broken engineers. The machine doesn't care about your rank or your degree, Arthur said, his words a gentle lesson rather than a rebuke. It only cares about who can make it run. Pride is the heaviest tool in the box, son, and it's the one that breaks the most. Arthur then reached down to the old worn leather pouch on his belt, the one Torres had mocked. He unfastened the flap and pulled out a simple battered-looking multi-tool. As the sunlight glinted off its worn steel, the world flashed again for Colonel Peterson. He wasn't a base commander. He was a young, terrified captain, trapped in a broken-down Bradley fighting vehicle in the middle of a firefight during the First Gulf War. His crew was getting hammered, and out of the smoke and chaos, a quiet warrant officer named Artie Corrigan had appeared, seemingly from nowhere. He'd slid into the driver's compartment, pulled out that exact same multi-tool, and hot-wired a fried electrical panel. As the engine roared back to life, Artie had looked at the wide-eyed young captain and said, "Pride is the heaviest tool, sir. Let's just get it done." Arthur Corrigan, holding the multi-tool, walked to the Humvee, pushed aside the useless laptops and leaned into the engine bay. With a few deft movements, he reached in, popped the cover off the relay box and pulled out the small black cube he had pointed to earlier. He tossed it to Torres, who fumbled to catch it. It was hot to the touch. Arthur pulled a spare from his own pocket, slotted it into place, and then knocked twice on the vehicle's fender. "Try her now," he said quietly. One of the younger engineers, his hands trembling, scrambled into the driver's seat and turned the key. The engine turned over instantly, roaring to life with a deep, healthy growl. The sound was a final, undeniable vindication. In the weeks that followed, a new directive was issued from the commander's office. It established the Living Legends program, a base-wide initiative to identify retired veterans working in civilian roles and offer them paid positions as consultants and mentors for the new generation of soldiers and contractors. Arthur Corrigan was, of course, the first appointee, with the official title of Senior Technical Advisor to the motor pool, though he insisted on keeping his janitor's locker. One evening, long after the klaxon had sounded to signal the end of the duty day, the motor pool was quiet except for a single bay light. Under it, Torres was diligently working on a different vehicle, his movements now slower, more deliberate, and much more humble. He heard the soft scuff of shoes and looked up to see Arthur approaching with his cart of cleaning supplies. The air was thick with an unspoken tension. Torres put down his wrench and wiped his greasy hands on a rag. He stood up straight. "Mr. Corrigan." "Sir," he said, his voice quiet and stripped of all its former bravado. "I never got the chance to apologize, properly, for my behavior that day. I was arrogant, and I was wrong. I'm sorry." Arthur stopped his cart and looked at the young man. Really looked at him. He saw not the puffed-up engineer from before, but a chastened kid who had learned a hard lesson. Arthur nodded slowly. "Apology accepted, son. What are you working on?" Torres hesitated, then pointed to the engine. "It's the EGR valve. I've replaced it twice, but I keep getting a coolant temperature sensor fault code. I can't figure out the correlation." A small smile touched Arthur's lips. He leaned his broom against the wall, pulled a nearby stool over to the engine, and sat down. "Well," he began, his voice taking on the patient tone of a natural-born teacher, "the problem isn't with the valve or the sensor. There's a hairline crack that can form in the coolant passage of the intake manifold on these models. It only opens up when the engine is hot." The scene in the motor pool faded to one of quiet mentorship. Under the single cone of light, the old legend and the humbled youth were side by side, their heads bent together over the intricate heart of a machine, a bridge of respect and knowledge finally being built, one lesson at a time. If you were moved by Arthur's story of quiet valor and timeless wisdom, please like this video and share it with someone who needs to see it. And don't forget to subscribe to Veteran Valor for more stories of the unassuming heroes who walk among us every day.